This is an apology letter from my chronic illness. I'm sorry I stole your youth so early. I'm sorry I made traveling hard. On this trip in the photo, I was so sick, my mom and I thought I must be pregnant, that something must be growing inside me. I took a pregnancy test, I kept throwing up, I kept not joining my family on our adventure. Now I know something was growing inside me. It was endometriosis and it had been growing for years, and I had already been avoiding it for years. I'm sorry I was hiding in your body long before you knew, so you couldn't prepare. I'm sorry the way I hurt you is often invisible, so the world can sometimes treat you as being invalid in your pain. I'm sorry you had surgery to remove me, but I'm still here, a ghost of a sickness. I'm sorry you can't dance much anymore. But for advice, if you can't dance as much anymore, I recommend pulling up a chair and letting your friends come to you. It's beautiful to both be a part of this experience at my wedding and be able to have a place to save my spoons. I'm sorry I've made sex difficult. I'm sorry I live largely in an area of your body that's supposed to create life and pleasure. I'm sorry I made you feel isolated and lonely. I'm sorry I made you doubt yourself. I've made you wonder if your pain even is real. That I've tricked your brain time and again with imposter syndrome when you have that one good day. I'm sorry I'm not better researched or funded. I'm sorry for all the events you've missed. I know you're extroverted, and I've been forcing you to be comfortable with loneliness. I'm sorry I sometimes make eating the hardest experience. I'm sorry I took whatever control you thought you had over your body and made you realize that some things aren't controllable, that even when you've worked so hard to control the outside world, you've crumbled inside. I have taken so many versions of this photo in different doctor's offices, hospitals, exam rooms. It feels like a way to control the narrative of the space, a way to remember each doctor, or a way to remember each step I've taken towards trying to help myself as I watch doctor after doctor for years tell me that I'm fine, that if I was a skinny mini, everything would be fixed, that periods are just painful as I report pelvic pain time after time. I recently learned that when you enter a doctor's office, the doctor stops listening and interjects after 16 seconds. They often cannot even be bothered to hear us, see us, and ultimately help us. I think every day of what would have happened if I had a doctor who actually listened to me sooner. I'm sorry you have to shower sitting down sometimes. I'm sorry you have to spend so much time sitting, resting, saving spoons, forgetting what agency over one's body feels like. I'm sorry I travel through your body like a well-known maze, lighting up all those familiar, painful spots. I'm sorry you're having such a hard time grieving me. I'm sorry that you don't want to accept me. For a little background on the piece, a while back during a therapy session, my therapist asked me how I grieve being sick. I looked at her and didn't have a good answer. I didn't grieve very often, and mostly I just kept pushing forward, not acknowledging how hard it was and mentally and emotionally to be sick. My mom recently told me a story about how when we were little, she would ask us, what is the fastest way to get from point A to point B? Then as young children, we would respond, a straight line, which we would then demonstrate a straight line with our arms to emphasize the importance of efficiency in getting where we need to be as soon as possible. This ideology is how I've lived my whole life. Efficiency being more important than facing the difficult moments, grieving the things I've lost, and not being afraid of facing the more complicated path to grow into life's challenges. My therapist asked me to write a letter impersonating my chronic illness and for my chronic illness to apologize to me for all the things, moments, feelings it's taken from me. I avoided this task till the last minute, of course, but once I started doing it, I became obsessed with how I'm grieving and how sickness has impacted me. I recently learned that when sunflowers cannot face the sun to get their nutrients, they turn and face each other, gaining nutrients from each other, banding together to stay alive. The zine is a visual representation of turning towards the sun and asking for lightness, and when there is no sun, turning towards each other and oneself. I am facing those moments of grief and still growing anyway. And as a fun fact, I recently learned that sunflowers don't do that, but you know, I really don't care, and I like to believe in a little bit of magic.